Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I am your host, Shana Terrell, educator, activist, dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for her people. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you to all of our guests who come back and support us week after week. And shout out to our newcomers here today watching this special edition of Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. I want to thank everybody who supported the Black Male Educators convening last week. Shout out to my coworker Amir, who was in the building, doing his thing last week, getting that all together. Thank you to all of our guests, everyone who did a workshop, everybody who led a panel, everybody who was a keynote. We really appreciate your love and support. Now, if you missed the Black Male Educators convening, no worries, everybody. It will be up for a purchase and a look at after November 15th. We should have it up on our website. So if you missed it, no worries. You'll get a chance to be there. But thanks. And shout out to Citizens Ed and shout out to Citizens Ed and the Center for Black Educator Development for creating this platform to allow us to talk to real people in the real struggle doing the real work. So today's theme is a special one because it is Veterans Day. So of course we want to thank everybody out there, all the brave men and women who have laid their lives on the line to protect us, and protect this country and protect our freedom and democracy. We love you, we thank you, we appreciate you. Today we'll be talking about service and building the Black Educator Pipeline, and our guest today will talk about his journey from Army vet to education and the power of camaraderie and service. So today, joining us, we will have Darius McInnes. He's originally from Flint, Michigan, and is the assistant professor of literacy at Westchester University and a doctoral candidate at the University of Pennsylvania. He studied early literacy and language development, Black family literacy, and out-of-school learning. He also teaches graduate level classes at Penn Graduate School of Education and serves as a summer learning curriculum specialist at the Free Library of Philadelphia. Specializes in learning resources as a learning fellow with the Weingarten Resource Center at Penn, and supports research projects on civic engagement and early literacy in both Penn Graduate School of Education and Penn Child Center. Darius is a board member of Action Tank, a veteran-based volunteer organization in Philadelphia, and volunteer reading coach with Philly Reading Coaches. Prior to coming to Philadelphia, Darius was a preschool and kindergarten classroom teacher in Washington, D.C., education pioneers in New Orleans, Louisiana, play ranger with the Homeless Children's Playtime Project, and a volunteer teacher at an orphanage in Kenya. In 2020, he was named Pat Tillman Scholar and served 5 years on active duty as an ordnance logistics captain in the United States Army. Darius enjoys reading Black historical texts, nonfiction science books, and he is a huge Stevie Wonder fan. So everybody, please welcome our guest, our very special guest today, Darius McInnes. Darius, welcome.
Thank you, Shayna. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in.
First and foremost, we want to sit up here and thank you for your service. Okay. I mean, today is a big day, and I think that a lot of times, we talk about helping vets and the support that vets needs. And I think that's a really important narrative to push. But I think it'll be great for people to see how folks do life after the Army, how they can still be major contributors to our communities and still want to be. So we thank you for your service in and out the Army, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. Honestly, it really is a humbling experience. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you. So talk to us. I think everybody's like, what? He is the assistant professor at Westchester. Well, let's rewind this. How did this brother even start his career to get into the Army? How did that journey start?
I guess I can start by saying that it started with me being in high school saying that I would never ever join the military. Like it was it was like, oh, I'm not doing that because my dad he actually retired from the army a few years ago, and so after we left Flint, we moved around the country. So I've lived in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Fort Stewart, Fort Hood, which is actually where I went to high school. And but my decision to join came from just coming out of undergrad, and honestly, just really, I wanted to give back, and I didn't know in what capacity. I just didn't see myself in the military prior to going to undergrad. But going to a PWI in West Texas really opened my eyes to a lot of things, particularly um, really just getting into who I was as a person and really just helping me find myself. And I, a friend of mine, well, a friend of my family's, she was a recruiter, and she said, "Hey, hey, Darius, we think that you'd be a good fit." And my mom was like, "Yeah, I think you should try this out." I was like, "All right, whatever. It's I'll try it out." And I was taking my ASVAB and everything that I had to do for the military. And I think the decision to actually do it, though, quite honestly, was one. I knew that I wanted to give back in some capacity, so that was one. And then two, I knew that I wanted a career working with and supporting children. I just didn't know how I was going to do that, and I wasn't really in a position, or I had no experience to do that because I majored in business. And so I just took the leap of faith, and it ended up being the best decision that I've ever made. So right after I voted for Barack Obama in 2008, maybe like a week and a half later, I went off to basic training, and then the rest is history.
And then bam, there you were in the United States Army.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think that sometimes, people we discourage people from going to the army. You don't want to go in there and fight those wars or whatever. But I think as a young person, trying to find yourself and trying to discover yourself. And as you're saying, like that was one of the best decisions you made. You also mirror a lot of the young men in my family who you saying your father was in the army. I have so many folks in my family who joined different branches. So Navy, Air Force, Army, Marine. So shout out to all my family members, Michael Fowler, Gregory Fowler, Ashanti Fowler, Marquise Fowler, Carlson Fowler, all my folks out there who were in service to this country. But again, right, trying to find yourself, trying to figure out what to do, you joined the Army. Now you were there for 5 years, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then ended up being a logistics captain.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Like
I started
what is
out.
it? Of course you're like, what's that? Like but in 5 years to like be in captainship, I think that's amazing. That's a testament to you going there and showing some leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, I went in under a uh, a commissioning program called the Officer Candidate School. So if you have a 4-year degree, you can go in, go to basic training, and then after that, you do something that's very similar to ROTC or to West Point, but it's condensed, where you go to basic training first, and then you go into OCS, and then you go into OBC, which is like your training for like whatever branch you're in. So I did all that, and I mean, I'm in my 30s now, but I was like 22, and it really wasn't, I was fine then. I don't think I could ever do that again, especially going like, I think it was maybe 10, but like 9 or 10 weeks in basic and then 12 weeks in OCS. And it was all very physical and mental stress. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, before, um, when you come in under logistics, we were branch either quartermaster, ordnance, or transportation. So the quartermaster officers did work with like supply and whatnot. Folks in transportation worked with vehicles, and then for people in ordnance, we kind of did kind of a combination of those things, but mainly with like the munitions. So I was an ordnance officer, and then once you become a captain, you kind of all three of those branches go into logistics. So I
Okay.
just say ordnance logistics because I got out right after I made my captain. Like I just didn't want that smoke with having to manage all of that. But
Yeah.
but yeah, that's how I ended up doing
I
that.
didn't want that smoke.
I
How
didn't.
was your
I didn't.
experience, or how would you describe your experience in the army? Um, do you feel like I know you say it was one of the best times in your life, but did you see like a really pivotal point or an experience that kind of transcended? Like, yes, like this is making me a better person.
Um. Oh, that's such a good question. I think I had so many moments in the army that I can think of that I think were just really transformative for me. One, being an officer, like to be really transparent with you, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. So before going in, I was, kind of not shy, but not really, I wasn't the loudest person in the room. I'm
Mm,
still not, but I've learned how to like command a room and how to use my voice. And I wasn't a person who I would describe as a natural leader. And being an officer in the military forces you to do that,
mm,
particularly when you're in charge of other people. And so I, my very first job, I had a platoon of 88 people, and I just didn't. I I had to figure out things so fast, and I'm a person who has a speech impediment. So I've been like the military helped me with. I don't want to say getting over it because I don't think that having a speech impediment is a bad thing. So for anyone who's watching who has one, like I'm with you and I understand how difficult it is to do that, especially when you have to communicate for a living. But
mm,
in situations where it's very high stress, very high demand, you have to learn kind of how to communicate really quickly, and the military helped me do that. The military helped me with sound decision making, learning how to follow like a protocol to like a T, because you just like in the army, that's just what it is. It is black and white, literally. Like
mm.
we have a doctrine that kind of guides everything that we do, and I would also say that being black, in America, like even when you go overseas, you still black. So like I still say like I faced a lot of the same issues that I faced being in America with just being in a black body, being perceived a certain way, being treated a certain way, being assumed that I wasn't competent, being assumed that, I didn't understand my job, or that I was supposed to bow down to other people, or it's we are folks of the diaspora. We all have that common um, the common experience of wherever we go, right? We have to wrestle with these things and confront these things all the time, and being in the military was no different, right? So even if you're in service, or even if you wear the uniform, you're still black.
Mm. And that, like, to hear you say that, I'm just like, dang. So even again, you are out here risking your life, um, no matter what color folks are, no matter what religion, no matter what people believe, right? Veterans are here laying their lives on the line for anybody in America so that we can experience what we like to call freedom. But yet and
Right.
still, here in America and deployed overseas, you're still seen as a black man
Still as a black
in,
man.
in fatigues, right? Like that's it.
That's it.
Nobody
Like,
takes into consideration the sacrifice that you're making.
that's
That's
right.
sad to think about. Well, shout out to you because we honoring you today, brother. Okay, your
Thank you.
sacrifice is not in vain. But you were deployed overseas.
Yeah. Went
Where did you
overseas.
visit? Well, I guess you weren't
Um,
really visiting; you were working. But where
yeah.
were you out here serving?
Um, hmm. Well, I'll say being overseas, the one experience that I can speak to is being in Korea, particularly. I worked in at the top of the peninsula
Okay.
in Tongdushong, which is, I think it's about maybe 35 miles north of Seoul. When I tell you, Shayna, cold, cold. I've never experienced cold like that in my life, and it's like it's already in the peninsula. Like in some areas, you really can't even see the sun just because of like
Oh wow.
just the air condition and the air quality, and
Yeah.
it was it was my first time being overseas. It's my very first job. That's where I had all of my soldiers. I had like 88, people, from the chaplain assistants to fuelers to cooks, people who worked in the dining facility, people who did maintenance. I mean, you named it. And I was just like, I was 22 and I was responsible for all these people. And I hadn't held a job higher than being a lab assistant in a computer lab at my undergrad. So I was just making it up as I went, honestly, just
So when people be saying stuff like the army makes a man out of you, like that's
I'm telling you,
like
got
you had to grow
cut
up quick.
quick, like got cussed out on my very first ammo mission. Shout out to Captain B. cussed me out. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, calling my phone, where's my ammunition, LT? What we doing? What we doing? But you learn very, very fast. Very, very fast because you just don't
I
have a choice.
see.
Um,
That's
to
dope.
adapt and adjust. And it really did make me who I am today, quite honestly. Those experiences, being overseas, working with so many different leaders, people who I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Big shout out to Colonel John Harris, who was my very first battalion commander, who like sat me down my very first day being at the unit. He was just like, "Hey, you are essentially a commander of a forward support unit," because of the way that like it was structured at the time, and I was like 22 years old. I didn't know what that meant, but he trusted me completely, and he saw something in me that I didn't even know was there. And so I'm grateful, for his leadership and for the experience overall.
Yes, the service and camaraderie. So people would be like, okay, you had this experience in armed forces, like you were in the army, you talking about you was a captain, like all of that. You done stayed in the coldest places, some probably been in some of the most dangerous places. But then you come out here, you in education. How in the world did that transpire right there?
Oh, I think I if I ever write a biography about myself, or if I ever like tell my story, if anybody wants to ever read it, I think I'm gonna call it a beautiful accident, because I think I ended up in the army like on accident, because just as I said before, like I didn't think that I would ever do it. I never thought I would be a teacher. I always knew that I wanted to work with kids, maybe like a counselor, you know, but I never thought that I would ever teach. But so when I was overseas, I'd seen a TED talk from a lady named Aletta Margolis, who started the Inspired Teaching Program. And that's kind of where, like when you're overseas, sometimes you just, you're looking at videos and listening to podcasts. And so I took an interest uh, in education, but I didn't quite know like where I fit. And so when I came back to the United States, when I was in Fort Lee, I knew that it was my time to transition out, because again, I didn't, didn't want that smoke going forward. But I was like, I think I want to go into maybe like the supportive role in education, because again, I'd taken an interest in education, but I didn't quite know where. So I found the Education Pioneers fellowship. I'm actually a part of a Facebook group for veterans, and a person posted it. So big up to Arlandis Jones. He posted it in the group. It was like, hey, they're looking for people to go into Ed Pioneers, and within this organization, these are people who support the field of education in different facets of education. And so this one happened to be the inaugural cohort for being in New Orleans, and I just applied. Well, actually, I didn't know that I was going to be placed in New Orleans. I just applied to Ed Pioneers. It was March. I knew I was getting out in June. I was like, I don't have a job.
I
Okay,
need a job. I
maybe
need to
this is
work.
what I'm
Yeah.
supposed to do. Yeah, So I go, and when I interviewed, I got it. I moved to New Orleans. Actually, June 10th. I got out the army June 7th, 2013. I drove from Fort Lee, Virginia, all the way to New Orleans, still in my fatigues. I packed up my little apartment, put everything in storage, drove to New Orleans, got there, and I worked with an organization called Crescent City Schools. So shout out to Kate. In New Orleans, they were doing a turnaround of one of the schools there, the Paul Haven School. And at that time, like the lottery and all of that, like everything that was digital that happens with getting kids into school with the charters, that really wasn't a thing then, and so people had to physically come in to register their kids. And so some of the kids were waiting around, like while their parents were registering them. And so I'm picking up books that we had that we were going to move into the classroom, and I'm reading them to the kids. And one of the parents, she said to me, she said, "Have you ever thought about, actually doing this, like being a teacher?" I was like, "Are you crazy?" Because I didn't want that smoke either, right? Like I was like, "Nah, I've seen how hard teachers work. I don't think that I could do that." But thank you for the compliment. But it was something about that conversation and hearing it from a parent, just hearing it from a parent, like for a parent to tell you that, I think that meant the world to me, and I gave it some thought, and I said maybe I can. And so I went back to thinking about seeing Aletta on the TED Talk, and I found the Inspired Teaching Program in DC, and I drove from New Orleans to DC. Still didn't have a job, kind of living off of my like disability and unemployment and my GI Bill. Like I'm telling you, I was like practically couch surfing. And
Mhm.
it was me and my little dog. Uh, his name was Rex. Rest in peace to Rex. And I applied to the program. I got in, and I thought that they were going to place me with like older kids, and they were like, "Nah, we think that you could work with the little ones that like suit your personality." I didn't want that smoke either, Shayna. I was like, "Wait, you want me to be in a classroom with really
With these
small kids, like
babies.
these babies? I just I just work with soldiers. Like we filling up,
Hey, like I'm a
vehicles.
commander man. You know what I'm saying? This is what I got going
Yeah,
on.
I'm,
Hey,
I'm
now you
I'm
want me to
still like
talk
this in all like the
me
pictures too. Yeah, you
with the
know,
kid? They posing with Mr. McKinnon. You like,
you know, and I trusted them, and I ended up in a pre-K classroom with Hannah Salisbury. Big shout out to her. Big shout out to Connie Brown. Big shout out to Leanne, the pre-K team. Big shout out to Rashawn and also Christina, who is my godson's mom. So that's nice. Like make those connections. But and I, Shayna, I had the time of my life. My students are the sweetest, most intelligent, most amazing people I've ever met in my life. And I
oh,
really do, like, even to this day, I just thank God every single day for that experience. And I was able to actually stay at the school because for the program is a residency program. So you spend the first
mhm.
year with a lead teacher, and then after that, you teach on your own. So after that, they asked Leanne and I to stay at the school. She and I taught together, and they called, they used to nickname us like the dynamic duo. She's one of my very best friends. I love her. We still like in touch today, and we had a chance to teach together, and we made magic. And then after that, I got to teach 3 year olds, and then 5 year olds. Big shout out to Aisha and Adriana and Paige and Shayna. It was the best job I've ever had. Even after like I retire from whatever, like my path takes me next, like my next beautiful accident, wherever
Yes.
life takes me next. I think I'm going to retire from that and probably teach like pre-K or preschool until I'm called home, because that was the happiest I've ever been in my life.
I think that's so amazing. And I think people who teach little people, like, you'll have a special place in my heart because, me and my little friends, I can't do it, yeah. They got a lot going on. They probably was calling you a Daddy McGinnis, all types of stuff, sneezing, touching you. That's the little people. So the people
Oh
who
yeah,
can deal with the little people, y'all have a special place in my heart. But to hear a story, I mean, there are so many awesome things right now about your journey. Just one, the decision to go into the army and do that. But your story post army is very similar to a lot of our veterans. How you were living off the GI Bill and your disability and unemployment. Some people never come out of that, which um I'm so hurt that our country treats veterans that way, that you go and you risk your life, and you do what you have to do to protect us, and then you come out and you guys are like searching to live, out there making sure that we can live, and then nobody takes care of you guys when you guys get home. So I'm super thankful that you were able to get up out of that, but then even more thankful that you saw it fit to be a leader of children, and that you saw it fit to find a place in the home in education, with our students. I feel like that's amazing.
thank
But
you.
then, I stopped and think, and I'm like, so when you were in the army, that's a different kind of warfare. But you
It
come home in the classrooms, our children are facing a very serious type of warfare.
is right.
So for you to again put on a different suit as a soldier, to get out the fatigues and put on a button up and be one of the front lines in protecting, preparing, and training our students, again, amazing.
Thank you.
So
You know,
go ahead. Hmm.
I was gonna say one of the things that I always joke with people is saying, and it's not quite a joke. I'm actually like low key serious. People ask me, is it harder to lead soldiers or teach small kids? And I'm telling y'all, the smoke I didn't want when I was a soldier, I think I would have taken that over teaching small kids. It is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, bar none. But it's also the most rewarding too.
Rewarding. I was gonna say the reward in teaching is sometimes greater than the risk. Whereas I can
Always.
understand how training soldiers, you like in comparison to the job is easier, but the reward is nothing like it. Sometimes to see young people learn to grow and to build these bonds and relationships. What do you think you learned in the army that prepared you for a career in education?
Oh, I think, wow. Uh,
And I'm
Many
I'm, I'm
things.
posing that question because I think a lot of again, right? We have these skills that are so transferable, and we don't see that because a lot of people will look at like, how do in the world you came from being in the army now you a teacher? Like, how are
Yeah,
those skills transferable? But I completely believe that they are.
yeah. I think one of those. I think the skill that probably stands out to me the most is just the criticality involved. To lead
Mm,
soldiers, you really have to know who you are as a person. You have to know your limits. You have to know what pushes you. You have to know what breaks you down. You know what you can handle, what you can't handle, and you have to be very, very, very cognizant of the ways in which your leadership and your decisions affects other people based on like your own emotions and and I think for me being in the army and being and like learning how to lead soldiers, I had to be very aware of my own deficiencies. I think that it's great to be cognizant of our strengths and where we shine, but I think in that line of work, you have to be very aware of where you need support and where you need help. And that's
mm,
where my soldiers came into play. That's where my leaders came into play. My NCOs came into play. They came in and they helped me in so many ways. And I think going into education, I think that same um, that very critical lens of yourself, that humility, that knowing your strengths. Like I'm a very personable guy. I'm a very fun guy. I have a very inviting personality. So it's great to know like my strengths, but I also had to know my weaknesses. I also had to know that I had to realize that one, it was very hard for me to accept help from other people.
mm,
The military broke me out of that, and I'm still learning that now, even today, like how to accept help from other people, and how to be vulnerable with other people, and that helped me out a lot going into teaching, and also Shayna, finding the the courage to say no,
mm,
because in the military you can't do everything. You just can't. It's a job where it's robust for a reason. There are many
mm.
people to your left and right for a reason, and all of us have to work collectively for the mission. I think that's even more so evident in education, because it really does take a village, and it takes you have to really you have to rely on a whole host of people, right? Like to to really help and support our kids,
Yep.
from the families to people in the community to to the veteran teachers in the building to the folks who are in nonprofits who are doing the work to bring some resources and folks into our school, the people who produce the literature and the research that we're looking at to help. I mean, it really is a team effort. So I think that going back to that camaraderie that you were talking about before, that really plays a big role. I think another thing that helped me out in the military was really just, I mean, as cliche as this may sound, it's being adaptable. I think in many professions, I think we talk about adaptability as just like responding to like crisis, right? Or
Hmm.
responding to like when things go awry. But I think you also, and especially in education, you have to be adaptable for good things too. Like it's not just enough to help a child, meet the benchmark, right? Like you have to be adaptable to help them reach beyond that. And so that is, seeing their potential, but more importantly, you giving them the inspiration for them to see it for themselves. So
Yes.
I think that that's something that helped me out too.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on some really great points that are transferable. And I definitely think your experience in the Army laid the groundwork for that. How great would it be if so many people in education saw education as you see it, as this huge ecosystem where everyone feeds one another? A lot of times we get teachers who are like, I'm just worried about my classroom. I'm gonna just go and close my door, and what I do with my kids is what I do with my kids.
Right.
But how you're explaining it, I mean, down from parents to teachers to the people who write curriculum, okay, and being
Right.
inclusive and seeing them as a part of that education ecosystem, but all for what? All to help children reach their full potential. And I
Right.
think if more people thought about education in the form of service and camaraderie, our children would be so much better off. Just down to if we saw ourselves all on the same team.
That's right.
Um, which is why sometimes I say education, right? You were in like Army war battlefield, but education itself is a battlefield. And where are the lines drawn, right? Like what
Right.
side of the line are you on? And
That's
depending
right.
on what area of the world you in, what school you at, depends on what kind of battle lines are drawn. Is it the
That's
teachers
right.
versus the students? Is it the community versus the school? Is it the
That's
teachers
exactly right.
versus the administration? So many different battle lines drawn. But I think
That's
the
right.
way that you are explaining it, if we see ourselves on the same team with camaraderie and with service, that's the only way that our children are going to win. That's the only way our children are going to succeed. So I think that that's an amazing lens um, of how you look at it. And kudos to you again for bringing that spirit into education. Now, Darius, it wasn't enough, right, for you to just to come on in and teach, right? That just wasn't enough for you, now was it? Okay, you said I'm gonna take it to the next level. Okay, I'm gonna go beyond the classroom and get into actually teaching and training the future teachers that will be in front of young people. Tell us about that switch. How did you switch gears from being in the classroom into going to higher education?
Um. Ooh. So again, everything in my life just happens by accident. Like I don't, I don't really plan.
Yes,
I mean,
Mr.
you
Beautiful
know,
accident out here.
people who know me know that I like. It's weird because I do plan. Like if you see my calendar, like I plan everything to the minute. But when it
That's
comes
that
to
old
long
army stuff.
term, see, yeah, that's because it forces you to have to like account for everything and every
Yes.
dollar spent, everything. But I think for like where I am now, came from so when I got into the classroom, as much fun as I was having, um, and I felt really supported by my school, loved my school, loved the families, and obviously love my kids more than anyone else. They really are my heart. And I felt like so in addition to teaching, I'd also volunteer with an organization called the Homeless Children's Playtime Project in DC. So I did that while I was teaching, and I saw so many things happening to children. And thankfully, Playtime was there to bring some joy and some light into their lives. But I had I thought about children who are in transitional housing being in. I thought about their educational experiences, what was happening at school, and
Mhm.
oftentimes for the program, what we would do is like after school, we would go to the shelters where they lived, and we would just play with the kids. Like that was like what we did. We were called Play Rangers, and so shout out to Playtime. They're an amazing organization. If you can donate, please do. But they when we would go and play with the kids, it was not just a time for just us to like play with toys and like to make up games and things like that. This was also like kind of a very therapeutic time for the kids. Like the experience almost became like cathartic, where they would talk about things that happened to them at school, things that were said to them at school, and things that they didn't get at school that I felt like I'd seen children at my school getting, right?
Mm.
I'd seen kids in my classroom getting these things, but the kids who I worked with, who are also my kids, like I call them my babies too. And at playtime, they weren't getting so many things. They
Mm.
weren't getting nurturing, they weren't getting love, they weren't getting attention, they weren't being pushed to to reach their full potential. They were being ignored, and I think that oftentimes children from families who are in destitute are always seen as people who come into the classroom with deficits,
Yep.
and
They come
I
they
was
come with a baggage.
a baggage,
That's how they're viewed. Yes.
the baggage, and I said, wow, we really have to do something about this. And I thought about ways to do that beyond the service in the classroom. And so I applied to doc programs for education to do that because I wanted to use research and bringing folks around, like from the community and folks in higher ed and just folks all over the place to build a team, right? To build that camaraderie, to make these experiences better for them, and also just think about my own kids, because I wasn't a perfect teacher, and so I wanted to also think about how I could use that experience to like reflect on my own practice and think about the ways in which I could have improved it for myself, and also to see more men who look like me in education because there were just
Hmm.
not that many of us. There still aren't, and so thank you for building the Black Educator pipeline because this work is still relevant. So I applied to grad programs. I ended up here in Philly at Penn, and there I just, well, here I just began reading and reading and reading and discovering things. And my intention actually wasn't even to go into higher ed. It's so funny. My intention was actually to I wanted to go back into the classroom and to work from that, like through that lens and that vantage point, to bring in
Hmm.
different people together and to create some new opportunities for the kids who I had worked with at playtime. But opportunities came along. Thankful to my advisor, Dr. Vivian Gadsden, to our chair at the time, Dr. Gerald Campano, uh, Dr. Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, Dr. Diane Wolf, and Dr. Amy Stornaiolo. They really provided like some opportunities to teach um, at Penn GSE, and from there, more opportunities came for me to adjunct at Westchester, which is how I ended up with teaching here, the classes in early literacy, and then it was almost like there goes a beautiful accident again, right? It
Accident.
was
Yes.
like people in this context really want to hear what I have to say. Because when I was a classroom teacher, folks don't want to hear what you have to say, right? Like, they're so busy blaming you for things and so busy
Mm.
like chastising you and trying to make you feel like you're the cause of, a whole host of like systemic things that are happening around the country. But for some reason, when you're in academia and you're standing in front of college people, people want to hear what you have to say. And
Mm.
so I said, you know what? I'm gonna keep the same mentality, the same energy. And this time, this was the smoke that I did want, right? Like I didn't want the smoke before in the other areas, but this was a hill I was willing to die on,
Okay.
because I had seen so many things happening to Black children, just not even in D.C., but also even when I was in Fort Lee, because I volunteered at some schools in the Petersburg area that were failing, and I mean, those like the kids there, they were experiencing the same things. And so I said, if one way to do this is to prepare people um, to go into the classroom with the mindset of one, dismantling the deficit perspectives of kids,
Yes.
particularly for Black children, to
Yep.
go in with the idea that you're going to learn from your kids just as much, if not more, right, than they learn from you. We have so much to learn from children, their ideas, their creativity, their brilliance, everything that they bring into the classroom If I can have a class where I inspire people and encourage people and push people to see the best in Black children and to help Black children bring that out into the classroom and to cultivate a space where they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel loved. Everything that I've seen the kids where I volunteered not having an opportunity to do that, if I can do that in my classroom and then inspire them to inspire people in their buildings, right? Their colleagues, the people who they'll be working with, to see the light and the love and all the warmth and the greatness that our kids bring in into a space.
I
I
love
felt
this.
like that was a new way for me to take this journey even further. And I don't know where it's going to go from here, but I'm hoping that my dissertation research can kind of help me figure out where the next phase is going to go.
But every mission that you take on, right? Like every space that you're in, it's the same thing. Number one, it's always a beautiful accident. But number two, it is always a theme of camaraderie and service and bringing people together and bringing services together and bringing resources together. Again, at the heart of it is to benefit the lives of children. You brought us some two very interesting points that I would love to expand on. One, this difference of being in a K-12 space and being a K-12 teacher, and the not necessarily the opposite of that, but the parallel to that of being a professor where you're a teacher in the collegiate space and how differently people are treated. What's so interesting about that point, we talk about this a lot in this space here with building a Black educator pipeline, is the lack of accountability that's placed on universities.
Right.
Teachers come into these spaces, right? And they get, like you said, blamed for everything from, I don't know, from what to what, right? The children need this and you didn't do this, X, Y, and Z. But yet they're coming from a place that we trusted, or the expectation was not even trusted. We gave you our money to train teachers to be put
Right.
into the classroom. You're the producer of the teacher.
Right.
But there's a strong lack of accountability in the higher ed space. And to hear you say, like, when I became a professor, this was the time people wanted to hear me. When I was a teacher, people didn't care. It was like, shut up and do your job. But nobody says shut up and do your job to higher ed. Everybody says continue to talk that rhetoric, even though you your levels of production and training are outdated, old, and frankly just aren't relevant to today's practice and how we should be treating children, especially
Right.
Black children. So that your whole experience, I think, in that realm was like super interesting and stamps what we've all been facing. Like teachers don't get enough support, and higher education doesn't have enough accountability
That's right.
placed upon them for teacher training because they have to do better. In schools,
Absolutely.
parents, communities, we have to do a better job of supporting our teachers and loving up on them.
That's it.
Because if we think about it, even in terms of right now, we talk about service in the army. Lives are at stake, right? People think about that in the very literal sense because war is war. People don't think about that in the literal sense when we're talking about children. That you have to hold the higher institution accountable because we're producing people who aren't ready to protect children in the right way of servicing them, and not just because
Right.
they don't want to, they're not
Right.
prepared. So again, if you were in the army, that would never be allowed to happen. They would never allow you to go out to war and shoot guns, and nobody taught you how to do that. They would never allow you to go out on a tactical mission and not know, whatever tactical procedures that wouldn't happen. But we're allowing
Exactly.
teachers to be in the classroom without proper training to be able to
That's right.
efficiently do their job. And that's poor. That's sad. So I appreciate you like pointing out the whole difference in that in your
Thank you.
experience, because I think
Thank
it's
you. I
important.
think.
I think that teachers right now are listening to like, yes,
Oh,
right, because
thank you.
people don't speak for them.
Yeah, it's. I mean, even even like the posts that we see from people complaining about, like even when the pandemic, began, and when people speak about education, they're saying, when teachers go back to teaching, then I'm like, go back to teaching. Like, what do you think people have been doing?
Do it.
Like teachers have been working overtime so hard, having to figure out a terrain that they weren't even trained, to teach in, like having to be creative and be their wonderful, amazing selves in a time where they could also be grieving. They could also be going through hard
Mm.
times. They could also be, experiencing their own things associated with being in this pandemic, and yet they're doing phenomenal work and still don't get the credit for it. And I
Mhm.
think, like, even just looking back to my military experience, we had so much oversight, right, from the government, about like what we were doing, and like, the doctrine, in which we followed. And I mean, going from a profession where we had a budget that was this big, right, in the Army, to going into K-12 where the budget wasn't. I mean, it was, you know,
Hello, we
it
got
just
money
meant.
for wars, but can't feed the poor. Okay, my man
That's
Pop
right.
had to
That's
shout him
right.
out.
I mean, it's that's real. Like, it's, going from one space where, people are thanking you for your service every day, to a space where hardly anyone is thanking you, or hardly
Mm,
anyone is, recognizing what you're doing and how hard you work, and how deeply this work has to be in your heart,
yes,
for the magic to happen. And it's frustrating,
and nobody wants to make the comparable difference in terms of like you get if you're in the army, you get thanked for your service because people are seeing the literal danger, right? The literal warfare. Um, but if people took a really closer look and opened their minds and looked at education, our teachers have really important jobs. So maybe not
right,
facing the same type of danger like staring down the barrel of a gun, but the importance of growing the
importance.
next generation, the next future, the importance, dare I say, it's the same height.
That's
It's
right.
up there. One is
Absolutely.
about protection and one is about building, right? Or
Yep.
training the future.
It
So, and
is
it's still both of them fit into the realm of protecting the future. One is in a
protecting the
literal
future.
physical sense, and another one is in a mindset sense for our future folks.
That's
Another
right.
thing I want to highlight about your story, right now, I think the percentage of black males in education is something like 1.7%. Um, and you rounded up one of the things, right? 2% is not enough for black men. And some would dare to say, like, Darius, you're a unicorn. Some might even classify you as an endangered species, in both of those spots: education, K 12, and higher ed. What are your thoughts on that? Because you're in this experience being in schools and being in places where you may be the only or one of 2 to 3 black men in both of the spaces you're touching. Um, how do you feel like your impact has been in being in these spaces and being part of that 1.9 or being part of that 2%?
Um, I think, uh, ooh, um, one of my very best friends, who's also one of my frat brothers, Ryan McLeod, brought this up, just last week, or just a few days ago. About like just the lack of accountability for, school districts and other places really not making a concerted effort, to bring in black men into the classroom.
Mm,
And just thinking about that, I I've been privy to conversations with, alternative teaching certification programs, programs at the higher ed level, where the intention is, like the tagline is, oh, we want to see more black men in the classroom. These are the things that we want to bring, like we want to do and we want to implement. But I think the execution is just not there. I think
mm,
one of those things is because, black men are not sitting at the table helping, to carry this out. There are so many things that come into play here when we talk about like the intersectional issues of what it means to be a black man in the classroom.
mm,
Folks having to address, some issues with like pay differences, which that's a whole other conversation. But like I have friends who have literally said to me, I would love to be a teacher, but man, I have to take care of my household, and that's just not sustainable for me. And I have friends who are actually in the classroom who just get really exhausted with having to be viewed as the disciplinarian, right? And so I think
mm.
that people think that
The
black
black tax,
men,
the taxing on the black man's soul.
black,
It's
the
crazy.
black tags going into the classroom thinking that, our job is to be these big, disciplinarians for Black boys, rather than like than figures of love and inspiration, and like folks, and for Black boys to see themselves into the classroom. I think just the notion that somehow we're supposed to be these people who go into the classroom and crack a whip or something like that, and
Mhm.
I think that in and of itself is a deterrent for people, because we were once Black boys too, right? And so uh, if we go into a space where out the gate people are saying to us like our students are a problem, right?
Mhm.
And you are the solution for it. I think can we stop at problem? Like can we just a hard pause right there?
Yes.
Like whoa, no, they're not a problem.
Again,
You
that
know,
deficit mindset towards our
that's
children.
that's it. It's like, well, I think that I think the opposite, right? I think that our kids are amazing and they are, and they deserve our very best. And to see, I think changing that just out the gate, right? Just the expectations of us going into the classroom to be these
Mm.
disciplinarians, and then the rollout of this, right? Like if you have a bunch of people who are not who don't understand the issues that Black folks go through or the barriers that we have to get to the classroom.
Mhm.
Big shout out to my friend Tina, who does research on one of those barriers being tests that
The
folks have
praxis.
to take. The praxis,
Is that Tina
being
Hubbard? I think that's her last name.
Tina Fletcher, but I
Tina
but
Fletcher. Yep.
yeah,
I know Tina
big
Fletcher. My girl.
big shout out to Tina Hubbard though, and like Tina does work on this right now. Like she's in the ed policy department at Penn, and she's doing some research on this and
Mhm.
how to get Black men into the classroom.
That's room.
And I
Yep.
think that I just feel like I think the last part of that, from my personal stance, is that it's I think so many people think that it's a very simple solution, and I think that in and of itself is an issue because this is such a multifaceted, complex, incredibly hard issue on so
Mm.
many levels that to think that a tagline or a motto or like a sentence in on like a website is going to fix that. I think that
Mm.
that's an insult to our Black babies. That's an insult to them.
Yeah. And what you're
It
speaking
really is.
about is do the work, people. Okay.
Do the
Um,
work. Yeah,
diversity statements are great. We appreciate the verbal support, but we actually want the verbal commitment and the physical commitment to
that's right.
diversifying this teacher pipeline, um, and showing some equity and doing a better job of getting Black males interested and supported once they reach a pivotal piece of being in the pipeline.
That's
So,
right.
shout
That's
out to you for seeing
um.
that. Like, come on, we need
Thank
y'all
you.
doing this work out here.
And shout out to you as well. Like, think about how many of these organizations should be bringing you and all the work that you do into these conversations, right? What have you learned? What can we learn from you? What can we take from all the work that you're already doing, right? What can we glean from this and go forward to really make this pipeline real? Uh,
Yeah.
and
And there's a lot
I
of
just
ways and a lot of things we're trying to do to like lift this up, and we're trying to move in the spirit of you, camaraderie, support, because it's going to take a coalition. It's going to take a group. Like you said, this problem is very difficult. It's super hard when you're out here trying to do years of systemic oppression, and policies, right, that have created the tearing down of the Black teacher Black pipeline, right? Because being in research and doing this work, like Black people have a long history of and tradition of teaching well of Black pedagogy and raising up our own. But a lot of stuff was done to be destructive and tear that down. But it's going to
right.
take a coalition of us to build that right back up. Um,
That's right.
I want to take a pause right now. We have a segment of our show that we call "Thank a Black Teacher." And I would love to give you the opportunity to thank some Black teachers. past, present, future, folks who you feel like were important and pivotal in your life, or just out there, colleagues, whoever. But we would love to take this moment to start. All right, so who would you like to thank?
Ooh, first giving a huge shout out to Mr. Central Hicks from Shoemaker High School. He was the very first black male teacher I've ever had. He was my speech teacher as a person with a speech impediment, as a person who didn't like to talk in front of people, and as a person who never saw another black man in the classroom. He was, I mean, just monumental in everything. And, he planted seeds long time ago, like for inspiration, for confidence that didn't grow until decades later. But I really want to give a shout out to him. I want to give a shout
Oh,
out to and a thank you to Miss Connie Brown from the Inspired Teaching School. She is such a giving, sweet, nurturing, creative, fun, wonderful, like all things. She helped me in really hard times, and I can't thank her enough. Anyone who has been at the school knows who Connie is, and she is just Miss Brown is the bee's knees. Big shout out to Miss Sybil Bolden, who was also at the Inspired Teaching School. When I moved up from preschool and pre-K to going into kindergartens, they're two different worlds, different materials, assessments, teaching styles. She really held my hand, and she really gave me tons of inspiration, um, tons of ideas, but also trusted me to do this work on my own. Huge shout out to my frat brothers who are also teachers who inspired me so very much. Big shout out to Jason, to Ja, to Jeremy, to Marquise, my LB, to Marlon, to Andrew. And I'm sorry if I'm missing anybody.
and what's
All
your
of you
friend? You can
guys.
shout your friend out. What's your friend?
Big shout out to Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity
Okay,
Incorporated.
incorporated.
And also want to shout out my friend Latricia Whitfield, who has been my rock in my program. She has taught throughout the elementary level. She is one of the most amazing, most intellectual, most gifted educators I've ever been fortunate to know. We talk about like camaraderie and community, and it's just a whole host of people who really helped to build my confidence, to build my inspiration, and to give me the sense of purpose for helping us dismantle the deficit mentality that folks have for Black kids and to move in a better direction. So, big shout out to all these Black teachers.
Yes, thank the black teachers. Give them their flowers while they are here. If you are watching today, please don't be shy. Thank a black teacher in the comments. Please like and share, but put your black teacher's name in there. Hashtag thank a black teacher. Shout out to everybody out there doing that work. One final question, then we got to go to wrap. But I would love to hear about this because this is also I think a major part of the work that you do. We talked about it like in general, but why do you think literacy is so important for the black community?
Mm. Um, I think literacy is important for the Black community because Blackness is so absent from education. Blackness is not lifted up in education. Blackness is not revered and it's not celebrated in education. And I think that one of the functions that literacy does, like outside of learning how to read and write, but it's also to read the world and how we see the world and and how we see others within the world. And I think that one of the functions of literacy and why I'm a literacy scholar is to help folks reimagine what it means to take up culture and life within our context, right, in education. So the books that we choose to read, the ways in which we take up and we uplift other folks' languages and their dialects across the diaspora. And I think that that literacy is also important for our community because I think that it is a prime way for us to think about how our children see themselves in the classroom, how they see themselves outside of the classroom, and how they see themselves beyond the classroom. So I don't. I'm a person who pushes back on the narrative that our kids are underachievers. I'm a person who pushes back on the narrative that our kids can't. And I'm a person who pushes towards a narrative of black kids don't have work to do. We have work to do to serve them so that
Mm,
they can get out into the world and be their best selves. So that means changing the deficit mind frame. That means being intentional about supporting and nurturing and loving them and helping to cultivate a space where are they are supported in every way imaginable, mentally, physically, emotionally, and academically to thrive. So that's where I think the scope of literacy lies at the bare minimum for our community. This is the bare minimum.
dope. Listen, we are at times. I would love to give you the space to just have a final word with the folks that were out there watching and supporting today.
I want to say thank you all for everyone who has been here with us today. Thank you to Shayna and her team for allowing me to come and to talk with you all today. Big shout out to all the veterans. Happy Veterans Day. Huge shout out to all of the teachers in higher ed, in K 12, in early ed spaces. Big shout out to all of you. And big shout out to everyone who wants to see these narratives about Black children being dismantled and all of us moving towards uh, a framework and a perspective that uplifts and loves our children as they deserve. And again, that's just the bare minimum. There's so much work for us to do. So thank you all for joining us today.
Yes, so we want to give a major shout out to Darius for joining us today, for being the beautiful accident on our show today. And again, thank you. We thank you. We appreciate you for your service, and shout out to all the veterans out there, um, past, present, and future, who are laying their lives on the line to protect our freedom and our liberty, or what we have of it. And shout out to my dad, RP, to Walter Henry Terrell Jr. out here, who was serving back in the day. But Darius, we thank you so much for your time, for your service again in the Army and outside the Army, and what you're doing right now in the pivotal work. We appreciate you for coming on. Thank you to all of our guests who are watching today. We love you all. We'll see you back next week, same time, same place, for building the Black Educator Pipeline. Peace.